From anime to manga to video games, why is the Japanese pop culture industry so successful? The answer involves a combination of various factors, including historical, economic, cultural, governmental, and geographical. After all, it is not obvious that a country like Japan would have a successful pop culture industry. Japan is not among the most populous countries, and its aging population doesn't seem to be the strongest production and consumption base for pop culture. The Japanese diaspora is not big and doesn't transmit culture the same way the Chinese diaspora does. Japan also doesn't have the international language of English like the US does. The country's industries were destroyed after the defeat in the Second World War, and its economy has been in stagnation since the 90s. Unlike former European colonial powers such as France and Britain, Japan doesn't have the same level of influence over its former colonies to transmit its culture. In this video, I will look at how Japanese pop culture originated, how it became successful and then spread across the globe, and where it will be in the future. In 2002, Douglas McGray, a writer at Foreign Policy magazine, published an article titled "Japan's Gross National Coup." In it, he wrote, "Instead of collapsing beneath its political and economic misfortunes, Japan's global cultural influence has only grown, and that Japan has far greater cultural influence now than it did in the 1980s when it was an economic superpower." Despite the lost decade, when Japan fell into economic stagnation in 1991, the country's pop culture is vibrant, attractive, and cool, and has gone to conquer the world and transform Japan into a cultural superpower. In 2002, about 10% of the world's cultural production was created in Japan. The commercial value of Japanese cultural products worldwide was estimated at $12.5 billion in that same year, contributing 2% to the country's GDP. Japanese global cultural export value, including the media, copyright, publishing, fashion, and other related entertainments and fine art, tripled in the 11 years between 1993 and 2003, totaling as much as 10.5 trillion yen for the entire period. In 2005, the economic impact of Japanese pop culture was estimated to be as high as 2 trillion yen or $18 billion. Pokemon, the most successful media franchise of all time, has grossed almost $100 billion since its inception in 1996 from merchandise, games, and box office. The impact of Japanese pop culture goes beyond economics. Out of more than 130,000 teens surveyed in Japan in 2013, 42.2% self-identify as a type of otaku. Otaku is a Japanese term that describes people with consuming interests that are often obsessive, mainly in anime, manga, video games, and computers. According to a nationwide US survey conducted in July 2022, 34% of American Gen Zs, around 15 million people, see themselves as anime otaku. Today, many people across the globe want to visit Japan and learn Japanese due to their love for manga, anime, and video games. To understand Japanese pop culture, we need to first look at the history of post-war Japan. After the US occupation of Japan ended in 1952, Japanese popular culture was influenced by American films and comics. However, instead of being taken over by American culture, Japanese creators localized these influences by integrating and absorbing them into their local media industries. The result is cultural products that are distinctively Japanese in style, yet have universal appeal. For example, the father of manga, Osamu Tezuka, was greatly inspired by Walt Disney, but used this inspiration to create original iconic works such as Astro Boy and Princess Knight. Japanese creators also turned to manga, anime, and other forms of pop culture to grapple with and express their anxieties resulting from the two nuclear explosions in the Second World War. Works such as Godzilla and Akira are a reflection of this post-war anxiety. It is also due to the experience of World War II that Japan emphasized a culture that reflects its pacifist constitution and pacifism among its people. In the post-war period, Japan's cultural industries were elevated by the need for the country to change its militaristic and imperialistic national image in the eyes of former enemies. Strategies that focus on projecting a peaceful national image by exporting appealing cultural products occupy a central place in the efforts of modern Japan. Japan's post-war economic success played a crucial role in the development of its cultural industries. The origin of Otaku culture took place after the electronics boom from the late 1950s to the 1960s. In 1958, only 7.8% of Japanese households had a TV, but by 1966, this number had reached 95%. By the 1970s, the tumultuous years of economic recovery and social upheaval were over and consumer pleasure was on the rise with the support of mass marketing. The post-war society of this period was one of saturation, where everything was commoditized and mediatized. Young Japanese became suspended in consumptive pleasure. Flush with disposable income, consumers spent freely on everything from entertainment to clothing, fueling the growth of those industries. Otaku culture was centered around visual mediums and has been developed in conjunction with technology. By the early 1980s, video game consoles such as the Famicom or Nintendo Entertainment System became available, and VCRs became more common, allowing fans to record, collect, share, and study anime, accelerating and expanding knowledge production. After the Japanese economy slowed down in the mid-1970s due to the oil crisis, social engagement dropped off and disenfranchised youth started seeking alternatives in fantasy. This was furthered by the economic stagnation of the early 1990s, with the resignation that marked this generation, causing many more to gravitate toward the fantasy in anime or games, even after they had passed through adolescence. These people also adopt a lifestyle around such interests. As generations have overlapped, a social structure has developed that has worked to increase the otaku population. Faced with a declining population of children, anime creators began targeting the adult audience, who also have greater disposable income. In addition to macroeconomic factors, microeconomic factors also influence the Japanese pop culture industry. In Japan, small companies and venture startups are vital for cultural production. The process of innovation, development, and commodification are shared by many competitive players rather than by a big few like Disney and DreamWorks in the American animation industry or Marvel and DC in the comics industries. The anime industry has about 450 production companies and 5,000 animators. The manga industry employs around 4,000 artists and 28,000 assistants, while in the video game industry, the workforce is said to be 18,500, found in 146 mostly small companies. In addition, there are hundreds of indie companies. Japanese media companies also acquire foreign companies to serve overseas markets better. Sony Pictures Television acquired American anime streaming and merchandise company Crunchyroll in 2017. PlayStation maker Sony Interactive Entertainment acquired American game studios such as Insomniac Games, Bluepoint Games, and Bungie in recent years. American manga publisher Viz Media is owned by Japanese publishing conglomerates Shueisha and Shogakukan. Japan possesses traditional cultural traits that makes it adept at inventing characters and getting inspiration from places others do not see. Unlike the West, Japan has a long polytheistic and animistic tradition originating from the Shinto religion. These traditions gave rise to the culture of personification of all sorts of things. The ability to tell stories and create characters from almost anything fueled the rise of creative works that turned into massive franchises like Hello Kitty, Doraemon, and Mario. Japan is also historically known for pairing visually comparing characters with narratives with illustrated hand scrolls or emakimono. There's also the Japanese artisan spirit, which promotes devotion to a craft, making Japanese creators more likely to lavish extra attention on the small details that elevate a creative work. When it comes to modern Japanese culture, the otaku subculture began in the 1980s due to changing social mentalities and the nurturing of otaku traits by the Japanese school system. The subculture's birth coincided with the anime boom before it branched into the comic market. Initially, the anime boom was led not by nerds but by youths who saw anime as a counterculture opposed to adults. Japanese nerds and geeks at the time were more into sci-fi and amateur wireless radio. They had yet to develop a strong group consciousness that would allow them to blur the boundaries between various interests until anime eventually brought them together. These otakus began to turn their attention to anime with the release of the 1979 sci-fi series Mobile Suit Gundam. Japan flourishes in the areas of manga, anime, and video games not because of the power of creative geniuses like Hayao Miyazaki or Shigeru Miyamoto, but because, compared to other countries, the communities that serve as the creative places for nerds, mainly school clubs and comic market, exist on a scale larger than normal. Japanese schools have a class structure that is similar to a caste system, but clubs are an exception to that hierarchy. In these clubs, a student's interests will be accepted and developed. Clubs devoted to the study of manga, sci-fi, or computers are frequently transformed into dens of otaku. Those unable to achieve academic or social success focus instead on their interests, often into adulthood, with their lifestyle centering on those interests. The environment created by school clubs that systematically encourage unpopular students to pursue interests other than sports is unique to Japan. Nerds can be found around the world, but in Japan, otaku are heavily linked to specific areas of interest. This Japanese school culture has played an important role in the development of otaku culture. Outside of school clubs, otaku also began to show up in full force at comic markets since the anime boom. Comic Market or Comiket is a non-profit, semi-annual convention that has been held mainly for fans of manga and anime starting in 1975. It is a grassroots event where people interested in hobbies gather on a large scale and interact with one another, in addition to the selling of self-published works. It is one of the biggest fan conventions in the world, with an estimated attendance of 750,000 in 2019, and is a fertile ground to nurture original cultures. Girls and women make up more than half of the otaku population in Japan and about 70% of the comic market participants. Japan is the only country where original modes of expression by amateur women have developed on this scale. This leads to many famous manga series being created by women, including Inuyasha, Sailor Moon, and Cardcaptor Sakura. The success of Japanese cultural exports by the private sector during the 1980s and 1990s caught the attention of the Japanese government and eventually compelled it to extend support. Japanese policymakers have been increasingly aware of the possibilities present in promoting pop culture and the constructive role that pop culture can play for Japan. Encouraged by domestic discourse, the Japanese government is examining new ways to assist the country's cultural exports to gain economic benefits and nurture a positive appreciation of the country overseas. Japan is seeking to project its soft power to the allure of manga and anime in its public diplomacy. The country has a strong developmental legacy of government targeting, promoting, and guiding investment in certain industries such as automobiles and electronics. In the last 2 decades, this legacy has extended to its cultural industries. The Japanese government's support for cultural promotion abroad consists of a wide range of uncoordinated and overlapping initiatives involving no fewer than 13 ministries and agencies. In 2002, the Japanese government launched the Strategic Council on Intellectual Property. The council aims to promote the growth of the nation's intellectual property, including patent technologies, design, films, and computer game software. In 2005, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs allocated 1.16 billion yen to promote Japanese animation and pop music in China. In 2006, the amount was almost triple to 3.11 billion yen. In the same year, the ministry also allocated additional funds on top of the 10 million yen for financing the export of Japanese animations to developing countries as part of the official development assistance program. In the course of these developments, influenced by Western rhetoric and practice, the expression of "cool Japan" was used as an umbrella policy term to cover various areas of Japanese culture. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry established the Cool Japan Promotion Office in 2010. Later, the Cabinet Secretariat set up the Council for the Promotion of Cool Japan in 2013, and 50 billion yen was allocated to the national budget for infrastructure promoting Japanese content overseas. Another important contributor to the success of Japanese pop culture is its popularity in Asia, the world's most populous region. The Asian market is a favorite destination for Japan's cultural exports, and is where Japanese contemporary culture and lifestyle have had the biggest success. This is due to geographical proximity, but also other factors. In recent decades, a big urban middle class has emerged in many parts of Asia, with increasing consumption demands and leisure time, which could be accommodated with Japanese consumer and cultural products like video games and anime. In recent years, a wide range of Japanese cultural products have been endorsed by local popular cultural markets of Asia, and now constitute an integral part of the cultural lives of many young people in this region. Japanese pop culture, in turn, has been influenced by other cultures in Asia. For example, Dragon Ball's creator Akira Toriyama was inspired by the classical 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West, as well as Hong Kong martial arts films. Dragon Ball characters use a variety of East Asian martial arts styles, including karate and Wing Chun. While Japanese pop culture is more popular than ever around the world, and especially in the West, in part thanks to globalization, it is also facing heightened competition from China and South Korea. In recent years, China and South Korea's rising soft power profile in terms of media culture circulation, overseas language education and tourism has accompanied the relative decline of Japan's influence on the international stage. These three countries are tough rivals in the soft power and cultural diplomacy competition, with China and South Korea learning from Japan's very own cultural industries. Chinese and South Korean games are becoming more popular and could challenge the Japanese game industry's dominance in the future. While Japan exports a lot of its culture, it also imports a lot from the rest of the world, including China and South Korea. This, to some extent, can have an impact on the domestic consumption of Japanese pop culture and its uniqueness. The Japanese pop culture industry could also be affected by rising geopolitical tension with China and the adoption of generative artificial intelligence in creative fields. With all of the mentioned uncertainties and Japan's worsening economic and demographic problems, will its pop culture industry continue to be dominant in the future? If not, then will the likes of Pac-Man, Totoro, and Sailor Moon remain relevant after Japan loses its status as a cultural superpower? Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you enjoyed this content and find it informative, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this in the future. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.